The Atlantic slave trade, a stain upon the conscience of humanity. For centuries, millions of souls were ripped from their African homelands, their lives traded as mere commodities. We often hear the numbers, but do we truly grasp the sheer scale of this human catastrophe? This is not simply a tale of ships crossing the ocean. It is a story of unimaginable cruelty, of greed that knew no bounds, and of legacies that continue to haunt us today. We will journey into the darkest corners of this period, unearthing the stories rarely told. We will explore the complex web of power, the chilling economics of human cargo, and the brutal realities of life and death on the perilous Middle Passage. Prepare yourself, for what you are about to learn may be deeply unsettling, but we must confront these uncomfortable truths, for only then can we truly understand the profound and lasting impact of this horrific chapter in human history. The popular narrative often paints a picture of European slavers descending upon an innocent Africa. The truth, however, is far more nuanced. While European powers played a central role in orchestrating this trade in human lives, they could not have done so without the participation of certain African kingdoms and elites. Internal conflicts, driven by power struggles and access to resources, created a climate ripe for exploitation. Rival kingdoms, seeking to gain an advantage over their neighbors, engaged in the capture and sale of slaves to European traders. This was a trade that proved tragically lucrative. These kingdoms, often fueled by the promise of European weapons and goods, became deeply entangled in the slave trade. The desire for wealth and dominance, coupled with pre-existing systems of servitude within Africa, created a complex and tragic dynamic that saw Africans profiting from the enslavement of their own people. It is a stark reminder that the slave trade was not simply a case of outsiders imposing their will upon a helpless continent. It was a tragedy, fueled by a complex interplay of internal and external forces with devastating consequences for millions. The internal slave trade within Africa predated Europeans. It was intertwined with punishment, debt, bondage, and warfare. European demand intensified these practices, transforming slavery's scale and nature. Local conflicts, once resulting in prisoner enslavement, were now fueled by the transatlantic slave trade. Villages were raided, families torn apart, and lives extinguished. The psychological impact on African societies was profound. The constant threat of capture instilled fear and distrust. This legacy of trauma continues to resonate today. The Atlantic slave trade was not simply an act of barbarism. It was a calculated business venture, a gruesome engine that fueled the burgeoning economies of Western empires. European nations, locked in a race for colonial dominance, recognized the immense profit potential of exploiting enslaved Africans. A vast and intricate network emerged, known as the triangular trade, connecting the continents of Europe, Africa, and the Americas in a web of commerce built upon human suffering. Manufactured goods from Europe were exchanged for enslaved Africans, who were then shipped across the Atlantic to work on plantations in the Americas. The riches generated from these plantations, sugar, tobacco, cotton, flowed back to Europe, creating immense wealth for colonial powers and their investors. This trade in human misery became the lifeblood of empires, financing grand cities and fueling industrial growth. The very foundations of modern capitalism, with its complex financial systems and global trade networks, were laid upon the backs of enslaved Africans. A chilling testament to the enduring power of greed and the human capacity for cruelty. The profits generated by the slave trade were staggering. Fortunes were amassed, not just by slave traders themselves, but by a whole ecosystem of industries that sprung up around this inhumane commerce. Shipbuilders, bankers, insurance companies all profited from the suffering of millions. Universities, often seen as beacons of enlightenment, were not immune to the allure of slave money. Many institutions benefited from donations and investments linked to the slave trade, their endowments swelling with the profits of human misery. Even today, the echoes of this dark chapter can be seen in the financial institutions and corporations that trace their origins back to the transatlantic slave trade. Their very foundations are intertwined with the exploitation of enslaved Africans, a haunting reminder of the enduring legacy of this shameful period. The Atlantic slave trade was not simply a historical aberration, it was a calculated system of exploitation that laid the groundwork for modern capitalism. A system that, despite its advancements, continues to grapple with the consequences of this brutal past. The hold of a slave ship, a black abyss, crammed with human cargo. Imagine, if you will, being ripped from the only world you've ever known, shackled and forced into this floating dungeon. The air, thick with the stench of vomit, excrement and fear. The journey, known as the Middle Passage, was a nightmare of unimaginable cruelty. Men, women and children packed like livestock, their bodies pressed together, often for months on end. Disease ran rampant in these squalid conditions. Dysentery, smallpox, fevers, death a constant companion. For those who survived the sickness, there was the despair. The crushing realization that they were no longer considered human but mere commodities to be bought, sold and disposed of at the whim of their captors. The cries of the suffering, the whispers of prayers and the ever-present fear formed a symphony of human misery echoing across the Atlantic. The Middle Passage, this brutal journey, claimed the lives of an estimated 2 million Africans. Those who survived emerged forever changed. Families torn apart, cultures shattered, spirits broken. The trauma of this experience etched deep within their souls. These scars, invisible to the eye, were passed down through generations, a shared legacy of pain woven into the very fabric of their being. The Middle Passage, a testament to the depths of human cruelty, its impact resonating through time, a chilling reminder of the horrors inflicted in the name of profit. The Middle Passage was not just a journey across an ocean, it was a descent into the heart of human darkness, a journey from which many never truly returned. Upon arrival in the New World, the enslaved Africans faced a new ordeal: the systematic stripping of their identities. Their names, their languages, their customs, all deemed a threat to the established order. They were given new names, forced to learn a new tongue, their past lives erased as if they were blank slates upon which their captors could write. This process of cultural erasure was as calculated as it was brutal. It aimed to break their spirits, to sever the ties to their ancestry, to transform them into docile and obedient workers. Families were separated, children sold away from their parents, communities fragmented, ensuring that the bonds of kinship and shared heritage could not offer solace or resistance. The rhythms of the drums, the stories whispered around the fire, the rituals that had defined their lives for generations, all were silenced. Yet despite these efforts, the spirit of Africa endured, its embers glowing in the hearts of a people determined to hold on to their humanity. The slave owners underestimated the resilience of the human spirit. The African traditions, though driven underground, found ways to survive. Hidden in plain sight, they were woven into the fabric of everyday life. Music, with its haunting melodies and syncopated rhythms, became a source of solace and a form of covert communication. Folk tales, passed down from generation to generation, kept alive the memories of their homeland and instilled in the children a sense of pride in their heritage. Religious practices, often blending African traditions with those of their captors, provided a spiritual haven and a means of preserving their cultural identity. The seeds of resistance were sown in these acts of defiance. The enslaved Africans, though stripped of their freedom, refused to be stripped of their humanity. They clung to the fragments of their past, finding strength in their shared heritage and passing on the embers of their culture to future generations. Religion, often seen as a beacon of hope and morality, played a chilling role in the justification and perpetuation of the transatlantic slave trade. The Catholic Church, a powerful institution with far-reaching influence, found itself deeply entangled in this web of exploitation. Some within the Church argued that Africans, considered by them to be heathens, would benefit from enslavement, that it was a form of salvation, a path to Christianity. This twisted logic, this cloak of piety, served to ease the consciences of slave traders and plantation owners, providing a moral shield for their inhumane actions. The Church, through its pronouncements and its silence, lent legitimacy to the slave trade. It turned a blind eye to the suffering, the brutality, the systematic dehumanization of millions, its moral compass seemingly lost in the pursuit of power and wealth. While the church hierarchy often condoned or even profited from the slave trade, there were those within its ranks who dared to dissent. Priests and nuns who witnessed the horrors firsthand, who saw the humanity in the eyes of the enslaved, who recognized the inherent evil of this system. They spoke out against the barbarity, condemning the cruelty and advocating for the abolition of this abhorrent practice. Their voices, often drowned out by the chorus of justification, planted seeds of discord, challenging the Church's complicity and calling for a return to its core values of compassion and justice. The Catholic Church's role in the transatlantic slave trade remains a dark chapter in its history, a stark reminder of how even institutions founded on principles of love and compassion can become complicit in the face of greed and power. A lesson for all time that silence in the face of injustice is akin to complicity. The abolition of the transatlantic slave trade did not end oppression for formerly enslaved people. Though chattel slavery ended, new shackles emerged to maintain the South's economic order. Sharecropping bound freedmen to the same plantations, trapped in debt and dependence. The promise of 40 acres and a mule was a cruel illusion. Convict leasing forced black men into brutal labor, echoing slavery's horrors. The legacy of slavery lived on, deeply embedded in American society. The fight for true emancipation and equality continues, a testament to resilience. As decades passed, the system of oppression evolved, taking on new forms but retaining its core objective, the control and subjugation of black Americans. Across the South, Jim Crow laws emerged, systematically denying black people their fundamental rights. These laws permeated every aspect of life, from education and employment to transportation and public accommodations. Signs reading "whites only" and colored became ubiquitous, stark reminders of enforced segregation. Black children were relegated to inferior schools, denied quality education. Black adults faced discrimination in hiring, lower wages, and exclusion from labor unions. The right to vote was undermined through poll taxes, literacy tests, and intimidation. The legal system became a tool of oppression. Black citizens were denied due process, subjected to unfair trials, and disproportionately incarcerated. Lynchings, acts of racial terror, cast a long shadow over the land. These acts of violence served as a stark reminder of the fragility of black lives and the threat of white supremacy. The period following the abolition of slavery was not a time of healing and reconciliation. Instead, it was a period of continued struggle, a testament to the enduring legacy of slavery and the fight for equality. The battle for civil rights continues to this day, a reminder of the unfinished business of America's past. The human spirit possesses an indomitable will to survive, to break free from even the most oppressive forces. On the plantations of the New World, amidst unimaginable cruelty, this spirit of defiance flickered and grew. It manifested in countless acts of resistance, challenging the very foundation of the slave trade. From work slowdowns and sabotage to running away and forming maroon communities, enslaved Africans refused to accept their fate passively. These acts of defiance were a testament to their courage and ingenuity. They were a beacon of hope in the darkest of times. The stories of these brave individuals and groups have often been suppressed, minimized, or forgotten entirely. The slave owners, fearful of inspiring further rebellion, sought to erase any trace of their defiance from the annals of history. But the truth, like a seed buried deep within the earth, has a way of finding its way to the light. And so, we must uncover these stories, these testaments to the unyielding human spirit, and give voice to those who were silenced for so long. For in their struggles we find not only a horrifying testament to the cruelty of slavery, but also an inspiring testament to the enduring power of the human will to fight for freedom. On the island of Saint-Domingue, a spark of rebellion ignited a firestorm that would forever change the course of history. The Haitian Revolution, a monumental uprising of enslaved Africans, stands as a beacon of hope and a stark reminder of the power of collective resistance. Led by Toussaint Louverture, a former slave of remarkable intellect and military prowess, the enslaved population rose up against their French oppressors. What began as a local revolt soon transformed into a full-scale revolution, engulfing the entire island in flames. The Haitian Revolution was a testament to the strategic brilliance, courage, and resilience of the enslaved Africans. Against all odds, they faced down the might of the French army, ultimately securing their freedom and establishing the first independent Black Republic in the Western Hemisphere. This monumental victory sent shockwaves across the Americas, inspiring hope in the hearts of enslaved people everywhere. It forced the world to confront the horrors of slavery and acknowledge the inherent humanity and right to freedom of all people, regardless of the color of their skin. The abolition of slavery, while a momentous achievement, marked not the end of a chapter but the beginning of a long and arduous journey towards justice. For the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade, a legacy built on centuries of exploitation, discrimination, and brutality, continues to cast a long shadow over the world today. Generations after the shackles were broken, the descendants of enslaved Africans still bear the weight of this horrific past. They grapple with the enduring effects of systemic racism, economic inequality, and the psychological trauma passed down through generations. The question of reparations, of acknowledging and addressing the profound debt owed to the descendants of enslaved Africans, remains a contentious and unresolved issue. Some argue that the time for reparations has long since passed, that the sins of the past cannot be rectified in the present. But to ignore this debt is to perpetuate the injustice that lies at the heart of the transatlantic slave trade. It is to deny the very real and lasting harm inflicted upon millions of people, a harm that continues to shape the world we live in today. The transatlantic slave trade was not merely a historical event, it was a crime against humanity of unimaginable scale and cruelty. Its legacy is etched into the fabric of our societies, woven into the tapestry of our shared history. To truly move forward, we must confront this legacy head-on. Reparations are not about assigning blame or seeking revenge. They are about acknowledging the enduring impact of slavery and taking concrete steps to address the systemic inequalities it created. They are about healing the wounds of the past and building a more just and equitable future for all. This reckoning requires a fundamental shift in our understanding of history, a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about our past and present. It demands a commitment to dismantling the structures of racism and inequality that continue to permeate every aspect of our societies. The path towards justice may be long and arduous, but it is a journey we must undertake. For only by acknowledging the full weight of history can we hope to create a future where the legacy of slavery no longer defines the lives of millions. The dark truth behind the Atlantic slave trade is that its impact never truly ended. The economic, social and psychological scars remain embedded in modern society, from racial disparities to systemic inequalities. Understanding the full history, not just the simplified version taught in schools, is crucial to addressing these lingering injustices. The journey towards healing and reconciliation requires a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, acknowledge the enduring legacy of this dark chapter, and work tirelessly to create a world where equality and justice prevail. Only then can we truly break free from the shackles of the past.